Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. In the last chapter we talked about, it was the one where Paul had to take Hera and her two sons after the battle he had with Jameis. And in that chapter we got to see some of the Fremen culture and stuff like that. So now this next chapter is a pretty interesting chapter. And because this one, Lady Jessica now has to take the water of life, because the current Reverend Mother for the Fremen, Reverend Mother Romello, is too old and too weak to make the journey, and they have to leave this steach right away and go to a different hideout, because they have to keep moving because the Harkonnens and the Sardaukar are hunting down the Fremen all the time. And so we get to see that whole process in this chapter and kind of like the ceremony behind it and all that. But the interesting thing about this chapter is nobody knows this with the exception of Paul, but Lady Jessica is pregnant. And so this has never happened before, and where someone had went through this ritual, taken the water of life, and been exposed to other memory while they're carrying a child. It's something you're not supposed to do. So she's kind of conflicted, Jessica, here in this chapter. She wants to secure her place among the Fremen, and for part of the prophecy to come true that was actually planted among the Fremen a long time ago by the Bene Gesserit, and for them to actually be able to get in really good with the Fremen, she has to do it. But then she thinks, well, she could use her son as a way out, because if she dies from this, because it's possible that if the person who takes the water of life fails to transmutate the poisons, they die. So there is a risk Jessica could die along with her unborn baby. And so she thinks, well, maybe I can use Paul as an excuse, as a way to back out of this. But she decides against it because she really wants, they really have to secure their place among the Fremen. And so she decides to go through with the ritual. The interesting thing is the water of life is created by, it's actually made by drowning a newborn sandworm of Arrakis. And it's kind of like the bile from the worm. That's what it's made of. So it's really high content, spice content, because the spice is created by the worm's life cycle and things like that. So in this chapter, what I find really interesting is we get a glimpse into the other memory, what it's like for a person to have other memory opened up to them. And we get a few other things that in this chapter too, just through that process of the other memory. We get to learn about the history of the Fremen a little bit here in this chapter, which is really interesting, I think. And so she takes this water of life, and it's like a really potent drug, and basically has this huge explosive, almost like psychedelic experience where when you take this drug, all the past memories. So she gets not only the memories of the Reverend Mother that's dying right now, or is really old and is going to die. She also gets all the previous Reverend Mothers before her, like through going back way, like a long time back. And so she gets all their memories, all their experience and personalities and all that. But when she's going through this process and she's kind of having this experience, she kind of almost can lose yourself in all the different identities in that pops up, because you have all these memories of all these other lifetimes. So they almost like form like a personality inside your head. And just the act of exploring them can cause you to actually lose yourself. So that's why you have to go through all this training as the Bene Gesserit and things like that, because if you're not trained for it properly, you could, it's almost like multiple personality disorder, and then one dominant personality can take over. So there's that. And then what's interesting is then, because whatever affects her affects the baby, so Alia, her unborn daughter, is basically awoken to full consciousness and other memory. So this would be a situation I would imagine would have to be traumatic, and it's described as extremely traumatic and absolutely, utterly terrifying to the fetus, because the fetus is brought like 100 brought to 100% awareness of not only what they are and the world around them, but all these past lives as well, where this is a baby and it never had any of the training that the Reverend Mother's had. It didn't have time to even live its own life. It's just brought to like this expanded consciousness instantly. And so it would be an extremely terrifying experience. And so Jessica can sense this other consciousness, and it's the consciousness of her unborn child, but also the consciousness of the Reverend Mother Romillo. And she kind of sees her as when she was young in this almost like huge like psychedelic trip she's going through as she's transmuting this water of life. And but the other thing, and this is something, you know, I've never really have been able to wrap my brain around when it comes to Dune. And it's always been somewhat of a mystery to me. I've heard one person's explanation for it, but I don't know if that's the correct one or not. But it's the place where only the Kwisatz Haderach can look, but none of the Reverend Mothers cannot. So, and Jessica comes to this point in her opening of the other memory in this book, or in this chapter. And so the paragraph kind of goes like this: she focused on the this word's a mouthful. Psychokinesthetic extension of herself, looking within, and was confronted immediately with a cellular core, a pit of blackness from which she recoiled. That is the place where we cannot look, she thought. There is the place the Reverend Mothers are so reluctant to mention, the place where only the Kwisatz Haderach may look. But what does that mean? That's the thing that I've never really gotten when it comes to Dune. And I've read the book a few times, but I've never really wrapped my brain around that. Now, I heard an explanation actually from Comic Book Girl 19, and her explanation was that is because the Reverend Mothers were women, only have, like, I guess the X chromosome they can't see through the down, so they can't see the Y chromosome, but where men have X and Y or whatever, they can see down both genetic paths of memory. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it sounded good, but I have no idea. But it's not really, a lot of things are kind of kept mysterious and vague. You got to really dig deep to figure out what they mean in Frank Herbert's writing. And I'm going to be honest, that's one I have never really been able to wrap my brain around or really understand what that means and what this place is supposed to be. I've never been able to really get a grip on it. So anyone listening in the comments section, if you can supply a good answer, I'd be really curious to know what everyone else thinks that means. And the other cool thing is we can look at the past history of the Fremen. So through this other memory, she can look through all the past Reverend Mothers that the Fremen have had. And so the line in the book is, there had been Fremen on Portrin. She saw a people grown soft with an easy planet, fair game for imperial raiders to harvest and plant human colonies on Bela Tegiz and Seleucus Secundus. So what's interesting about that is the Fremen are this really, like, in this point in the story, are really ferocious people that have no time for any kind of crap, because on Arrakis, the environment is so harsh. It's all about survival of your, but any kind of weakness is all you're done. So the Fremen have been made into a really strong people, because only the strongest ones can survive in this environment. So it's like the evolutionary process. You know, anything weak goes. Only the strongest can survive. Even their culture got really harsh rules that seem cruel, but they're necessary because the environment is so harsh. But we can see in the past, they were on, the Fremen were on this other planet called Portrin, way back in the past. Because remember, at this point, the Fremen have been on Arrakis for 10,000 years. So this is more than 10,000 years ago. But this was like an easy planet. You know, so they must have had it really good because they had grown really soft. So again, it's that theme that Frank Herbert's have in his book, where your environment affects the people. Not only do the people affect their environment, but you're affected by your environment as well. So they were on a soft planet and they became a soft people, and that opened them up for raiders to come along and capture them. And then there's even she can even see like images of the men being put in the slave encampments and cages and all this kind of thing, and they're spread around all over the different planets like Harmonthep and other planets like that. So then she gets the realization that the Fremen culture is much, much older than what they previously thought, because the Fremen are descendants of the Zen Sunni wanderers, and that they go all the way back to, you know, the battle against the thinking machines before the Great Convention, like way back. And so I really like that you got a bit of background on the Fremen culture in this chapter. I thought that was really cool, and like a bit of the background of the history of the Fremen, other planets they have been on, and you know how they've been enslaved and captured before they got to Arrakis. And so in this chapter, obviously Jessica successfully transmutates the water of life, so then Paul and all the others are able to drink from it as well. And then so Chani wants Paul to drink the water, but now Paul's kind of reluctant to drink the water, doesn't really want to drink it, because he's kind of worried how this is going to affect his consciousness. Because remember, just eating the Fremen food made him like see all these multiple timelines and stuff before, and he kind of like wigged out on the spice really bad. So he's kind of reluctant, but he does it anyway. And of course, it opens up his prescience, and he can see like images of the future that involve Fade Ryutha, the Imperium, the Sadukar coming to Arrakis. All that just kind of explodes in his mind, and he sees this, you know, this. It's described in this chapter as the Fremen are the sleeping giant that gets awakened, and then they go across the universe in a holy jihad and a holy crusade for Muad'Dib. And so this is the fate that he wants to avoid. And then he tells Chani, like, all he can think about is the moments of peace that he's going to have in between all these storms, and that's going to be with her. And that's kind of how the chapter ends. So you can see he's really starting to bond with Chani in this chapter, and you know their relationship is forming more and more as the story progresses. So I really like this chapter, and I really like how it's written with, you know, basically Jessica's consciousness being blown wide open, all these past lives and experiences and all these things, and then even more mysteries being created. It's this is a good chapter. I like this one. I thought it was pretty interesting. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you at the next one.